Hello everybody and welcome once again to Quick Trivia with Mike, the weekly quiz show right here on channel 955 where we test your knowledge of somewhat obscure trivia facts, and the winner always ends up getting a prize of some sort. We typically ask you 3 questions. The show begins by giving you the answers from last week. We then announce the winners from last week and we move on to 3 new questions. I know we've got 3 really good questions for you today. You're going to have a lot of fun with them. And we had some really good questions last week. Lots of you called in with your answers on what you thought the answers were. But let's see what they were, okay? The first question that we had delved a little bit into Academy Award history. We told you about how the Academy Awards can actually become a cultural phenomenon right here in the United States. A lot of times really great movies can help form people's opinions on entertainment or politics or history. And we told you a little bit about the history of some of the winners. Katharine Hepburn having won the most lead actors in the history of the Academy Awards. John Ford having won the most Oscars for directing. We did ask you who won the most Academy Awards in the history of the Oscars, which were first awarded in 1929. We explained to you that the Oscars actually were there to award the performers and the directors and the editors and the camera people for artistic and technical merit in the film industry. The first radio broadcast of the Oscars was in 1930. The first TV broadcast was much later in 1953. Again though, we asked you who has won the most Oscars in the history of the Academy Awards. The answer was a little bit of a trick question. I know many of you thought of performers as the winner of the most Oscars. It turns out that the winner of the most Oscars actually went into a different category. It was in fact the incomparable Walt Disney. Walt Disney has won 26 Oscars. He was nominated for 33 more. Virtually all of them were in the categories of animated short films. The Three Pigs and Snow White. That's where Walt Disney made his mark. And that's how he ended up winning more Oscars than anybody else. That was the answer to the very first question. Our second question was a bit of a what am I? And we held up a picture. My cameraman and producer, Scott McFerrin, zoomed in on it. And you were asked to identify what this is. I identified it as something that was manufactured in 1921, and it actually made life much easier for many people. Let's talk about it for a minute, shall we? A lot of things were happening during the 1920s. Electricity was becoming commonplace in everybody's homes. Telephones were starting to become very common. Radio was in its infancy. Cars were going from a luxury item to something that a lot of people had. Roads were getting better. What was this item? We had lots of very, very good guesses as to what the item was, but there was only one correct answer. Look at it closely. It was a toaster. A toaster. This made life in the kitchen much, much easier for a lot of people. In fact, several people got this right, and I don't really know for a fact, but I'm going to guess most people that got it right, because if you took the casing off of a contemporary toaster, the insides would look very much like this. How we make toast in the kitchen hasn't really changed since the 1920s. We've just made it safer for people by putting fancy chrome plating around it and things like this. But the insides actually look very much like this. Instead of these bars that you saw running through it, there are little wires now and things like that that heat up and toast the bread. But that's what it was, a toaster. The bread was held between the prongs of the cage and pushed down towards a heating element, which crisped it right up, and breakfast was served just that easily. So that was the answer to question number 2. Question number 3. You know I like to do a little bit about Milwaukee trivia whenever I have an opportunity to do so. In fact, we're going to have some on today's show as well. But we talked a little bit about how Milwaukee grew as a city, the population trends, and the different ethnic and racial minorities that came into Milwaukee and became really a bedrock of the foundation of this community and have made Milwaukee the wonderful city that it is today. We talked about the Irish and the Germans and how they had such a dramatic impact on the expansion of Milwaukee in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. We also talked about the fact that in 2010, the 2010 census, much of that makeup has changed. Some of it just because of the expansion of the population. In 2013, there were 599,000 people in the city of Milwaukee, which made it the 31st most populous city in America. 45% of the population was white, 40% was black, and 17% was Hispanic. We asked you specifically, when was it that the African American population in Milwaukee grew to a significant number? We specifically referenced the population of 7,500 African American residents. When did the city of Milwaukee pass that benchmark in their history and in their population? I gave you 4 options. Was it the 1910 census, the 1920 census, the 1930 census, or the 1940 census? The answer was, for all of you who played and participated, 1930. In 1930, the population of the African American community in the city of Milwaukee surpassed 7,500 individuals. And as you know, it's about 40% of the population today. 240,000 African Americans live in the city of Milwaukee. So it has really matured as a population on its impact in Milwaukee and its additions to the growth of culture within the Milwaukee area. So 1930 was the answer to that. Now, for those of you that play along, you know that when we have a tie, and we determine the winner by the individual who gets the most answers correct. When we have a tie for that, we have a tiebreaker. If you listened closely to the bumper music, when we entered the show today, it was a very well-known show tune. We ask you to identify that music as the tiebreaker. It's not necessarily required as one of the 3 questions that we ask you, but if there's a tie for the most questions answered correctly, identifying that bumper music is the key that we use to determine the winner. This past week, the bumper music was All That Jazz from the show Chicago. All That Jazz from the show Chicago. I hope you paid close attention to the music when we started the show today. If you missed it, we're going to be playing another segment from it at the end of the show. Identify that music, and that is the tiebreaker for next week's show. Well, we didn't really need the tiebreaker this week because we had one person that actually got all 3 questions correct. And well, that is correct. We had one person that got all 3 questions correct. Coincidentally, they identified the bumper music as well. But it wasn't necessary this week because the most questions answered correctly, other than the winner, was only 2. The winners this week are the Hills. The Hills, living over in the Contemporary on the 2nd floor, our winners this week, and congratulations to them. They correctly identified Walt Disney, the electric toaster, and 1930 as the decade that the African American population surpassed 7,500. Congratulations to them. They'll be receiving their bottle of wine as their prize for winning this week. Now, I've had a lot of feedback on the prizes that we award. And a lot of people tell me that they would like to try something new. It isn't necessarily for the bottle of wine or whatever that people play. They play for the fun and the potential recognition among their neighbors here at East Castle Place as having been the winner of trivia. This next week, the winner of trivia is going to get their name on Touchdown. For the entire week after we announce the winner, they'll be identified as the winner of Quick Trivia with Mike. So the Hills were the last ones that will receive a bottle of wine. From here on out, the winner is going to be getting the recognition that they deserve for being the grand champion for the week of Quick Trivia with Mike. So there you have it. The Hills from the Contemporary are our winners of this week's trivia. Let's move on to our new trivia questions this week, shall we? Again, you know that I love to jump off a little bit on Milwaukee trivia. We're going to start today on our 3 trivia questions with a little bit of trivia about the Milwaukee County Zoo. The Milwaukee County Zoo was originally formed in 1892. Its original inhabitants, it was created as a showcase for miniature mammals, and it also housed a bird display in 1892. In 2002, through continuous growth, the zoo expanded to over 800 animals. It was housed on 23 acres of land located in Washington Park. Washington Park was the original home of the Milwaukee County Zoo. In 1934, the zoo officially became a part of the Milwaukee County Park Commission. In 1958, the zoo moved to its present location out on Blue Mound Road, and it's been there ever since. It actually became a nationally renowned habitat for wildlife that people could come and see and experience and get up and close. From 1958 to 68, the zoo tremendously expanded. New buildings included the primate building, the aquarium and the reptile building, the Australian buildings and the winter quarters. New habitats were also created, which included Monkey Island, grizzly bears, polar bears, brown bears, etc., etc. In 1970, it continued its expansion with the Children's Zoo, the Doll Shape exhibit, the train shed, the Zoo Hospital, Zoo Pride, and the gift shop. That leads us pretty much up to today. In 2015, a publication that prides itself on protecting the natural habitat of animals and also their captivated habitats within zoos. The publication called The Dodo actually named Milwaukee County Zoo one of the 10 worst places for a captive elephant to be housed. As a result of that, because of the national reputation that the Milwaukee County Zoo held, the fathers of Milwaukee County decided we're going to have to do something about the zoo. And they went about creating a new habitat for the elephants. However, as you know, the boundaries of the Milwaukee County Zoo were established in 1958 and they haven't really expanded since then. So if you add to something, you have to take something away. And unfortunately for Milwaukee County, they had to do that. In 1999, a particular animal came to the Milwaukee County Zoo with its 4 siblings, and it lived in a natural habitat until the last of the 5 died in 2017. Their natural habitat was turned over to the Milwaukee County Zoo, which used it to expand the habitat and the showcase now for the elephants. What was that animal species that no longer resides at the Milwaukee County Zoo. By the way, since we opened the new elephant habitat, which opened in 2019, Milwaukee County has added to its elephant herd. Belle arrived at the zoo in late 2019 and joined Brittany and Ruth. We now have a 3-elephant herd at Milwaukee County Zoo, and again we have regained our reputation as one of the nation's best zoos, and it's a wonderful tourist attraction. Once we get through this pandemic, I know people will be flocking to the zoo. So that's your first question today. What animal was it that lost its habitat when the last of them died in 2017 to expand the habitat for the elephants? Now we're going to go off a little bit onto space trivia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the moon. We've got several items here about the moon that I think you're going to find very fascinating. The moon is the Earth's only natural satellite. It was formed 4.6 billion years ago, which was about 30 to 50 million years after the solar system was actually formed. I know Americans don't like to believe this, but in 1959, the Russians actually landed the first unmanned, but man-made capsule on the moon. However, it was the Americans with Apollo 11, 10 years later, that landed the first man on the moon, Alan Shepard, as we talked about in a previous show. Couple of other wonderful things about the zoo. It is true, it really is true that the tides on Earth are caused by the moon. However, quakes on the moon are caused by the Earth. So the two terrestrial bodies actually influence each other to a great extent, a lot more than anybody knows. Up until today, 12 people have now walked on the moon. All of them were Americans and American manned space flights. The last, however, was in 1972. It is, however, a misnomer that there is a dark side of the moon. That's actually a myth. The reason it's a myth is that the moon is in synchronous orbit with the Earth. It spins at the same rotation as the Earth, and it spins around the Earth in the same revolution. So the Earth is only looking at one side of the moon all the time, but each side of the moon receives equal sunlight. We're just not aware of it because we're only looking at one side of the moon at all times because of the synchronous orbit. The moon is, in fact, the 5th largest natural satellite in the solar system. A lot of people don't know that. Because of the fact that the Russians were the first to land a capsule on the moon in 1959, the Americans at that time knew that we were starting to lose the space war. There actually was thought at that time to regain supremacy of the Americans actually detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon, just to prove that we had the capacity to do so. Thankfully, our political and military fathers from 70 years ago decided that that really wasn't a very good idea. And as a result of that, we didn't do that, and moon exploration proceeded pretty much naturally, and we're glad of that. However, I now have a question for you. When you look at those old videos of astronauts from the old Apollo series of missions that landed on the moon, you saw them leaping and bounding. You saw one of them even hit a golf ball, and it seemed to go on forever. The reason for that is that gravity is much less on the moon. Something that you will also be glad about if you were ever to travel the moon is that weight is affected by gravity. If you wanted to lose weight, all you'd have to do is go to the moon. The reason for that is that the gravitational pull of the moon is less than that of the Earth's. And weight is a function of body mass and gravitational pull. My question to you is, what is the difference in gravitational pull between the moon and the Earth? Is the gravitational pull of the moon 1/3 that of the Earth's, 1/4 that of the Earth's, 1/6 the gravitational pull of the Earth, or 1/10? Is it 1/3, 1/4, 1/6, or 1/10 of the Earth? And for those of you that are wondering how that would affect your weight, if you happen to go to the moon, your weight would be either 1/3, 1/4, 1/6, or 1/10. It would be identical to the change in gravitational pull. So you could go on an instant diet just by traveling to the moon. That's question number 2. What is the difference in gravitational pull? The third question I have for you delves a little bit into some trivia that we talked about several weeks ago. Gilligan's Island. You remember when we talked about Gilligan's Island, that there was some trivia about the boat, the SS Minnow, how it got its name. I revealed to you at that time that the SS Minnow was actually named after a gentleman named Newton Minnow, who was the head of the FCC at that time. Newton Minnow made the famous statement, "Television is a vast wasteland." He really didn't have much respect for the quality of programs that were put out. And he didn't have much hope in the future of better quality programming coming along. I can tell you, however, I sincerely disagree with Newton Minnow. Some of the best quality entertainment is provided by television and has been forever. For example, for every Newton Minnow-esque type show, for example, My Mother the Car, there is a PBS masterpiece where we watch a Downton Abbey or Upstairs, Downstairs. For every silly show like Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, you might find a Carol Burnett show, something that had wonderful quality entertainment for the entire family. And I encourage you to go through old television programming and watch some of those old programs, even new programs today. There are television programs that affect the culture and the psyche of the world we live in today. And that's because people take real pride in their craft and they pride themselves on putting out quality programs. However, there's another aspect to television programming that I want to delve into today, and that's ratings. I'm going to ask you what are the 5 highest rated final episodes of television series in television history. The 5 highest rated television series finales in television history. I'll tell you, number 5 was Friends. Their final episode after their 10-season run had 52.5 million viewers. Situated in the city of New York, we watched the wonderful goings-on of Joey, Chandler, Monica, Phoebe, Rachel, and Ross. For 10 seasons, the final episode aired in 2004. Again, 52.5 million viewers. The 4th highest rated final episode of all time was Seinfeld. 76.3 million viewers tuned in 1998 after its 9-season run. Jerry, Elaine, George, and Cosmo Kramer, we laughed at their antics and we enjoyed everything that they had to offer us over that entire 9-season run. And 76.3 million people tuned in to see the final episode. The 2nd highest rated final episode of all time, Cheers. 84.4 million viewers tuned in after its 11-season run in 1993. Sam, Coach, Diane, Carla, Norm, Cliff, Frasier, Woody, Rebecca, all of them reveled in the final episode. 84.4 million people watched that series that was based out of Boston. Ironically, there is in fact a facade of a building in Boston that looks like the entranceway to Cheers. It's the Bullfinch. I myself have actually been in it. But the Bullfinch looks inside nothing like Cheers. There's another bar that was created specifically after the fame of Cheers to look like the inside of the bar. It's located in Boston, but it's not. It does not have the facade that the Bullfinch does. The highest rated final episode of all time, MASH. 105 million people tuned in 1983 after its 11-season run. We watched the ongoings of Hawkeye, Trapper John, Colonel Henry, Hot Lips, all of that over 11 seasons, and in 1983, 105 million people tuned in to view it. No television show in the future is ever going to top that amount because of the fact that there are just more television stations to watch today. The thought of getting 105 million people for the final episode of a show is just unfathomable. I will tell you, however, there is one show that had more viewers, and it was one of the Super Bowls. I forget which one, but one of the Super Bowls has had more. You might have noticed something unique about the four that we mentioned. The fifth, fourth, second, and first highest rated show. They were all situation comedies. The third highest rated final episode of all time was not. It was an hour-long drama. 78 million people tuned in to watch the final episode in 1967. It is loosely based on an episode in the life of Sam Shepard. That episode took place on July 4th, 1954. Again, 78 million people tuned in to watch the final episode of an hour-long drama. The final episode aired in 1967. What was that hour-long drama? That is the third highest rated series finale in television history. Well, there you have it, folks. Those are our 3 trivia questions for today. I hope you had some fun with them. Get your answers to me by emailing me at mbrever@eastcastleplace.com or calling me at 963-8425. I know I went through that way too fast. Call the front desk. They'll give you my email address or my phone number. Give me the bumper music as well, which we're going to end today's show with. Maybe that'll give you a little bit more of an insight and give you a little bit of edge up if we have a tie in this. You could also drop your answers off at the front desk. They'll put them in my mailbox or slide them under my door. That's acceptable as well. I'm Mike Brever, your host of Quick Trivia with Mike. I want to thank the management of Channel 955 ECTV, Tyler Gudex, our president, Laura Wengler, our executive producer, Scott McFerrin, our producer, and he happens to be my producer and my cameraman, a wonderful man to work with, just great. And Cooper Ledvina, our artistic director. There you have it. Call in or get your answers to me by noon on Monday. Maybe you'll get your name up on Touchdown next week as the trivia champ for the week. That's all for now. I'm Mike Brever. Have a great week. Stay safe. Stay smart. Please be patient. We'll be open again at East Castle Place very, very soon. So long, everybody.